like to introduce Mr. Cai Yiping, committee member of the Develop Alternative with Women for a New Area, and she's focus is also on media and communication, gender-based violence, sexual and reproductive rights and health, and gender mainstreaming. And now she's based in Beijing, China. And she will present a very interesting paper, and really, I think that's really follow up with what Professor Sundari just talked, is really see how the economic development may not really lead to the improvement in the women's health, and use China as an example. Yeah, so now welcome Mr. Cai Yiping with the presentation on economic development and women's health in China.
Thank you very much, Chair, for your introduction. Dear colleagues and friends, good morning. First of all, I feel it's a big privilege to have this opportunity to share some of my thoughts on this very important topic towards a just economic order for sexual and reproductive health. I also own your apology for last minute change of my topic. My original topic is economic development and women's health in China. I meant to look closely at China's ranking and performance in the three sets of widely used gender indicators: UNDP's gender development indicators, gender inequality indicators, OECD's social institution and gender index, and World Economic Forum's global gender gap index. In comparison of Chinese health indicators in this national gender equality and women's development indicator framework. That's my original plan. However, I had a very nice Vietnamese coffee last night, and I stayed whole night working on my PPT on this topic until 5 a.m. when I all of a sudden realized I need to throw away my previous presentation to talk about something totally different, because I don't want to bore you with something you already know about China. China's Human Development Index increased significantly in the last 3 decades and makes significant accomplishment in health and education, according to all the official reports. But meanwhile, China also experienced an increase in social inequality during over 30 years of rapid economic development, which you also know very well. But more important, I think, is what we can learn from this China story, especially from the perspective interlinkage of economic justice, gender justice, and ecological justice for sexual and reproductive health. That's why I changed my focus. I hope you forgive me. Let me begin with clarifying 3 myths around this topic. First myth is about dominating narrative on the concept of women economists, or notion of smart economists, which you know better. This term refers to the idea that women's economic advancement will improve economy, and that should be the reason to promote pro-gender equality policies. Also, from this perspective, it is understood that gender discrimination and the violation of women's human rights, including their sexual and reproductive rights, are economically inefficient. For example, their economic cost on gender-based violence in the form of income loss, lower productivity, etc., and that is why it should be overcome. It sounds very logical and convincing, especially as the tactics for policy advocacy, and when we're talking to the decision makers and people who have the resources, but it's based on a false value. If economic efficiency is the reason to promote gender equality and improvement of women's sexual and reproductive health, that can catalyze women's economic advancement. What would happen if it does not prove to be this way? For example, evidence proves that the cost of violence against women is not that high. What we're going to do with these results? Or, for the cost of implementing public policies to narrow gender gaps in the labor market prove to be expensive than the economic gains, what we can do with that. It is important to reform the human rights as the centrality of sexual and reproductive health as fundamental principle and underlying value prior to the arguments on the economic efficiency. Economic efficiency is good argument, and I see it's more efficient if we use as the complementary rather than the fundamental, the principle. The second myth is about public partnership, PPPs. In the Agenda 2030, two targets and the SDG 17 explicitly promote multiple stakeholder and public-private partnership, target 70.16 and 17.17, and endorse the private sector as a key development actor. Within this framework, multi-stakeholder partnership are being promoted, not only by government, but by UN, with no accountability mechanism attached to it. There's a concerns on bilateral or multilateral public-private partnership are promoted for both infrastructure and sectors such as education, health, and other public services. PPP are promoted with the assumption that, one, governments are unable to pursue the required public investment to basic public goods, and the second, PPPs can introduce technology and innovation to improve efficiency. Here again, efficiency come out. However, this is the contrary evidence of the negative effects of PPPs, especially the fiscal risks, overcharge, and fiscal unsustainability, as well as the failure to provide the needed and high-quality public goods and services. The European Commission's expert panel on effective ways of investing in health adopted an opinion in 2014 based on the review of 15 PPP cases in European countries by independent consultant. They state that public disclosure of data and analysis behind PPP investments is very poor, inconsistent, and not standardized. The expert panel has not found scientific evidence that PPPs are cost-effective compared with traditional forms of public finance and managed provision of health care. There's another case by Oxfam in 2014 about PPP in health sector in African country, in Lesotho, that 3 years after the hospital opened in 2011, government's expenses grew 64%, and the budget for this hospital represent half of the entire health sector public budget of that country. The third myth is about science and technology as a fixer or easy solution. The rapid and revolutionary development of science and technology, such as big data, artificial intelligence, artificial reproductive technologies, and surrogacy, among the others, catalyze the transformative way of thinking around human bodies, sexuality, production, reproduction, and rights. You might notice there was Sophia. It's a robot, Sophia. It's interesting. She has a woman's name. Was granted a citizenship in Saudi Arabia, and she allowed not to wear veil. And she lately had interviewed, and she said the family value is good. So I don't know how to make a comment, because this is a totally new area that the health and the sexual rights, the activist hasn't really, to explore or to investigate fully. But I think there's some, new scenarios and also need to worth noting and investigation. Growing influence of the business sector and pharmaceutical companies pose the new challenges on the SRHR in terms of ethics, accessibilities, quality and inequality, as well as depoliticizing the human rights-based agenda how to dismantle the corporate power and the market-driven solution and fight for the transformative and the structural challenge remain the biggest task in front of us. Lastly, how we can move forward from here despite all of these challenges and difficult environment. There's no easy answer. I don't have an answer yet. But I think I have some suggestions. Maybe we can start with the following 3 actions. First, let us ground our analysis, critiques, and advocacy and mobilization deeply in reality and address the real issues. Why I'm saying that? More than 20 years ago, as I heard from the senior colleagues and the feminist movement, the advocates that's coming from ICPD, the Beijing, and all this, long way. Feminist activists and human rights activists have strived to expand the space in the multilateral platform like UN and make a paradigm shift during the 1990s from population control to sexual and reproductive health and rights, the agenda that we're carrying on up to now. However, today, many of us that are working closely in engaging with those spaces are really trying very hard to hold the line to prevent the regression on the human rights. And many of these norms and values are severely challenged, not always succeed. It's very frustrating, the process. And I think another frustration is that we forgot how to speak the human language. After so many years, we're speaking a UN jargon. And also, there's a lot of new issues and new realities that need our urgent response. We hasn't paid enough attention. I was hoping that from the young people discussion, they would talk about something like ICT, the mass surveillance, because everyone was, working on their cell phone and social media, and nobody talking about those issues. I was surprised, and how we, address this real issue, and how we translate the SDG goals, 17 goals and 169 targets into the language that the community can understand and can work with us. I have big difficulties, and I want, every one of us here to think collectively. And how we develop our own language, but language that reflects the reality, not only, for advocacy or policy engagement. No need to say that's very important, but I think we also have other very important tasks. Secondly, on the second action I would propose is alliance building. Yes, it seems like only women, we're talking about SRHR, only the people with unconfirmed gender identity, have an imperfect sexuality, or imperfect body, talking about the body and sexuality. We're supporting, as a women major group, I remember in 2012 in Rio, we support everyone's agenda, indigenous people's rights, environmental protection, even the animals' rights, everyone's rights. But when we're talking about women's human rights, sexual and reproductive health and rights, sexual rights, wow, they leave women fight alone. Where are the people from the labor movement? Where are the people from the environmental movement? Why not we build alliance? What's went wrong that we were not able to gain their support? So that's something we also need to rethink and re-strategize. And also I think the SRHR advocacy is overwhelmingly focusing on sexuality and reproduction. It often overlooks the broader and profound linkages between body, sexuality, production and reproduction, nature and livelihood. Therefore, it may miss the opportunity to challenge those dominating power and dominating narrative that define body, both women's and men's body, both everyone's body, as a labor, as a consumer, as something to be extracted and instrumentalized for the profit. As a result, it often leaves women and the feminist group and other marginalized and disadvantaged groups at the front line of those battles. As sexuality and reproduction are perceived as the pure women issues, or LGBT issues, or SOGI issues, related to the body of the particular group and not everyone. It makes it difficult to build a broad alliance across the progressive social movement. So this is something maybe we should think about. In conclusion, let us work together to reclaim body as the source of power for defending rights, for the claiming rights, for fight for well-being, the dignity, and the plenary well-being. Making human rights frame truly work that need to combine the framework of human rights integrate with the equality and the justice. This is my last message to all of you, and thank you for your attention.